Power BI is an amazing data visualization tool, but there are areas that it does lack in, and that can come with the actual visualizations and the limitations and ones that don't actually exist. But also, if you wanted to do any statistical analysis, it's a lot of hard work. But this is where R can come in and fill in those little gaps to be able to make Power BI even more powerful. And all it takes is just a few lines of code to be able to just get that information, to be able to create that particular visualization that you want, or get that statistical analysis. So let's just jump over to my laptop and I'll show you how. To be able to actually use R in Power BI, you still need to actually install R. It doesn't come with Power BI, so you need to download the base R program to be able to actually use it within Power BI. If you already have this installed on your system, you can skip to the next part where I start showing you how I do this in Power BI. If you haven't, all you have to do is just head over to the link I have here. I also have it in the description below, and this will take you to where R can be downloaded, and you can download these for macOS or Windows. As Power BI is Windows only, we're just going to be downloading what is the Windows version, and obviously if you have a Mac you can use Parallels or another VM system to be able to actually install it, but this is just going to be doing as if you are using a Windows machine, so it would work the same as well. So all you need to do is click on that, and then within here you just do install R for the first time, and then you can download it. You can also use that if you update the current R you've got, and if you do that you just got to remember that it's going to save additional one and you need to update with the new one in your Power BI options, which I'll cover in a sec. So all you need to do is just click on the install R for the first time, just go through the installation process, and then once that's done, then you want to head over to install what is a nice clean IDE called R Rstudio. You don't have to download it to be able to use this with Power BI, but it's just a lot nicer to work with when you'll need to do things like install packages, or just if you just wanted to do something in R outside of Power BI. It's just an easier to use interface when you're using R. So all you need to do for this one is just go down, do install R Rstudio here. It also tells you can install R, which will take you back to the one which we just done, and then again you can just click on this, download. Once you've downloaded and then installed it, you can then open up R Rstudio, and then you'll see an environment like this. If you download the Rscript that I have saved within the description below, that will then give you all the information you got here, so you can just open that up and then it will give you all the R code that I'm going to be using within this video. And if you want to know my setup with a dark mode, and also I have different font sizing and everything, I've got all that in my description below as well. So now you have R installed. What you want to be able to do is just open up your Power BI, and then if you go to File and go down to Options and Settings, click, and then once that opens up, just go down to R scripting, and then down here you'll see where your R is being picked up and your IDE is being picked up. If they are not showing in there currently, try giving your computer a restart, see if it picks it up then, because normally it will just pick it up automatically. But if it doesn't, all you need to do is just browse to your program files, look for the R folder and select your most current R. So if you've got more than one installed, I've got rid of my old one, so I've only got these now. Just click on that one and do OK, and then it'll show up here. And then if it doesn't show you what the detected R IDE is, select R Rstudio if you downloaded it, and then that way it will link if you need to be able to open up anything in R when you're doing the visualization. Once you've done all that, all you need to do is just click OK, and then you have it all set up. Now, as I mentioned, you can use R within Power BI to do visualizations or even statistical analysis, but you can also use it for transformation. So instead of you just using pure Power Query to just do your transformations, and you wanted to do it via some code that you might have got, or you might have been someone who's just used to using R, never used Power Query, you can actually use your R code to be able to transform your data actually in Power BI within the actual transform data area, which is technically Power Query. So if you click on transform data, within here, this is where you can do, like I say, your Power Query to do your transformation. So I'm just using a data set that I have saved in the description below. There's a link to it there, and it's called the Superstore sales data set. All I've done is just do get data for an Excel file. So new source, Excel workbook, went to it, and then it automatically did transformations. And then I've just removed columns that I did not need. But like I say, you can do exactly the same with R. So this is the table loaded loaded in with Power Query, and then this is the table loaded in with R. So if we just do a refresh and then we get the table, this is exactly the same table as the one we've got here. And how that's done is I've used code, which I've got saved here. So I'll show you. This code here is basically pulling in where the Excel file is saved, which is in my documents folder here, and that's what it's called. And then I'm only selecting certain columns, which is doing the same as what I was doing with the Power Query, where I was just only selecting certain columns, and these are the ones here. And then all I've done is literally just taken that whole bit of code there and then put that into an R script. So how you do an R script is you go into new sources, go more, type in R script, and then you see it pop up here. So you get an R script, and also if you use Python, you can do Python script, but we're just covering R in this instance. All you do is click on that and then connect it, and then this will give you a pop-up that just looks like this table here. It will just be a blank table. Annoyingly, you can't make it any bigger, so it's just gonna like hang over a bit. But all I've done is literally just copy over all that code that I've got in here. But the only difference is I'm doing library, which is loading in an already installed package, which you got read Excel, which is basically to be able to read Excel files. And this is what you're using in this part here to actually pull in the file. And then dplyr, then all that's doing is basically pulling in the table and then just selecting the columns that you need. And then that's where you get this particular code, which is exactly the same as this code here. But like I said, we're only doing it from this bit here, because one thing you can't do in Power BI is install a package. And this is why you need to have maybe something like R Rstudio built in, because it just makes it just a little bit easier to maintain, to see what packages you've got, because you can view them down here, install, update them, and generally it's just a lot easier to maintain any R code you have. But to install any packages you need, all you have to do is type in install.packages and then in brackets and then quotation marks the package name. So if you find any online that you want to use, this is what you need to do. But generally online, they'll give you literally the code to be able to actually do this anyway. It's pretty much a copy and paste and then just tailoring it for what you need to actually do with your data that you're pulling in. And then once you've done that, you just click OK. And then what it will do, it will just then convert everything, which is what it does with the navigation one. And then change type is just basically just changing any of the types that don't match to what you wanted. It automatically figured out what the types were. And then there was only one that I just needed to change to a date, because I think it was date time, or it come through as something else. But yeah, it converted it to dates, and then that's how it got there. So that's the only change I did using Power Query. And then once that's saved, all you need to do is just do close and apply, and that will take you back in. And then just to show that it's exactly the same results, I've got the Power BI table here, and then just pulled in sum of sales. As you can see here, it's the Power BI one. And then if I click on this one, we can see it's sales R. So it's the R table, and again, sum of sales. All I've done is just pull in the sales one. I haven't done a measure or anything. I've just literally just dropped it in, and then I've done the same with the tables. And you can see it's exactly the same information. So you've got exactly the same data, all transformed using two different ways, either Power Query or R. So that's one thing that you can do if you wanted to be able to just jump into Power BI if you've never used it before and you're only used to transforming with R. That's how you can do it. Or if you just wanted to be able to do some playing around with R and just doing the transformations that way, or there might be some really fancy bits of transformation that you need to do that you can't do in Power Query that you can use an R script for, you can do that. You can even include it just part way through where you've actually already done mostly Power Query. You can then import an extra one in, and then that will just then be able to just do that transformation for you, and then you can carry on using Power Query afterwards. So like, your possibilities are endless because there's so much R can do. But like I said, we can do visuals, and one of the great things about Power BI is that it's been adding new features constantly through the time it started back in, I think it was like 2016, maybe 2015, something like that. It's been like a good 7 odd years now Power BI has been around. When it first came out, it was just very, very limited, and there were cases where you wanted a particular visualization and it just wasn't available. And then they added the R and Python visual to actual Power BI as a main source here. So as you can see over here, we have the R visual, and then that allows you to then create an R visual. So all I've done here is just show you where you can use small multiples to be able to do stuff. So if we wanted to say change region to say the year, and then we do region, you can then see how it changes, and then it splits them out in the different years. And that's really, really handy, because there's times when you want to be able to show different side-by-side distributions of data, be able to see if there's any particular parts or areas, like in this case a region or a year, where there were spikes or dips, and that's where small multiples are really, really handy. But these are fairly recent, and back in 2019 I become stuck when I needed to do some analysis for a particular large global financial company, and this is where I needed to be able to use R to just create a form of small multiples, because it didn't exist yet in Power BI, be able to just give that analysis that I was giving the view of what I was trying to convey. And since then I've just been using R whenever I've been struggling to find anything that I needed to be able to do straight out the box, or even with custom visuals in Power BI. And even though Power BI have finally added small multiples, they don't have it on everything. So if you want to use a scatter plot, you can have it, but if you go to the scatter plot, you'll notice you click on it and there's no small multiple down here. The only solution to do in Power BI is to create loads of different graphs of all the different ones. But if you just wanted to switch out in different ones, or there were new, say in this case, categories, or a new year starts, maybe we did it over a year and then a new year, you'd have to create a new one every single time, and sometimes you wouldn't look at that analysis again, and it would just be in a report that's sitting there and just grows over years or whatever, and it just continues to grow over time. So the way around that is to use R. Now if I click on this scatter plot, it's using exactly the same data and it looks practically the same. The only difference is you've got the legend up here and then you just got the extra bit. But how this works is if I click on it, we can see we have our R visual here, and then we've got this little box that pops up that gives you information about how to actually create your script. So everything below here is what I've added in, and this is what's been created off the back of adding in the different parts here. So you can see here what's happened is it's created what is your data set, and that's whatever you call anything. So normally if you're working in R and you set a variable that whatever you're going to be calling your data frame or data set or whatever you're going to put in there, that gives it a name. Normally you would think, we're using sales and Power BI to be able to do this. And as you can see, I'm using the Power BI sales table here and not the R one, because I'm just showing how you can just use a Power BI actual just table, just one you've created. You don't have to use the one you've created in R. All you have to do is literally just drop in what columns you need and what data you need, what measures you need, so on and so forth. And then it literally just creates you a data set, which is your name. And the data set is whatever you replace anything that you're putting in here. So whatever you would normally name something in R, that's where you put data set. So in this case, what I've done is create a ggplot scatter plot to be able to create this one here. And to do that, I had to install the package in R for ggplot2. All you do is load that library by using library and then in brackets ggplot2, because that's the package. And then in there, I've put ggplot, which is what is anything you want to set to be able to create your visual like this. And then data set, which like I said, is whatever your name of where your data table is. And this is always called data set. So whenever you do anything in Power BI, always data set. And then in there, all we're doing is just setting sales across the x-axis, profit across the y-axis, and then we have color as category just to break it out. And then we've got the point, which is the scatter plot. So these are all the little dots you see, and then you can change the size, and then everything's all plus. And then theme minimal is just reducing, because sometimes it comes with a gray background or there might be bits all around there. So theme minimal is really good for that. And then theme, and then legend dot position top. That's just putting the legend across the top. And then to actually get these trend lines, you do gm_smooth, and then method lm se false line type dashed. So that's where you get it dashed, and full range true. The reason why you need to put full range true in is because this will stop at the point of, say, the last red is around here, so it stops there, and the green's about here, so it stops here. The blue will carry on to there because the blue's there. If you do full range equals true, it will make it go all the way to the end, so you can see the trend line going up, so you understand where the actual line is going to go all the way to the end. And that's all that is. And then all you do is just click on your run button, and then that's how it creates your actual one here. And the great thing is you can put some filters in if you wanted, and you can filter. So if we go 2017, see it's refreshing, and there you go, it's changed to 2017. So you still get that functionality of that. But the only thing you don't get is if you click on any of these, unlike the one which you use when it's a Power BI visual, you don't get the luxury of being able to use these by clicking on them to change or be able to see what that information is. But now, if you wanted wanted to make that into a small multiple, all you need is one bit of code, and that is called facet wrap. And great thing about facet wrap is you have control over how you want things to be positioned. So in this case, we've got the exact same information here. The only thing we're adding on here, facet underscore wrap, and then in brackets, you have the, I think it's called the tilde squiggly thing. Yeah, I can never remember the name. I should always actually remember this before I start doing these videos, but I never bother to think about it. And then you put region, and that's literally whatever you want these sections to be. I'll put region. In this case, I've done, I think I did years in this one. So I've done both. That's what I've actually done. And I've used facet underscore grid to do this one, because then that gives you it broken down with the top and bottom. So you can see here, you've got your years going down, and then your regions to the side. And how you do that is do region, and then the tilde, squiggly, and then year. And that's how you can control it. So you actually have even more control than you do normally with the other small multiples. So even if you do use an actual small multiple on like a bar chart or line chart that you can already do, you can actually have a bit more control if you're using R. Now, one of the great things about R is there are so many packages out there that allow you to get data for so many different things. And I'm going to show you an example of where you can get football data in very easily just to get that data you want. So you can see, say what we've got here, the Crystal Palace versus Arsenal game. There's a package called worldfootballr that you can use to pull exactly this information. And then all you need to do is just know what the URL is. So if we go back to our Power BI, all you need to do is install the package worldfootballr. Have the information on how to do that in the description below. I also have it in the Rscript, so you can just use that section to be able to install worldfootballr if you want the most up-to-date package, or if you're going to just use the base R version. But if you want the most up-to-date one, there's a little bit more to it than just using install.package like you normally do. But it will work again if you just wanted to do it this way. So once you've got that installed, then all I needed to do was again just go up to new source, Rscript, start building out the thing. All I need to do is just put in what is library worldfootballr, and then they have a particular function that's called fb underscore match underscore summary, and that's the thing we were just looking at then. And then all this is just that same URL, and then all I've done is just called it match sum, so I'm just naming whatever the actual outcome is as the table name, and then you just do OK, and then it will just navigate, and then you suddenly have the information. So as we can see here, the match date was the 5th of August 2022. Crystal Palace were the home team. They did a formation of 4-2-3-1. They didn't score. Their home XG was, so Crystal Palace's home XG was 1.2. Because they had no goals, there's none there to tell you who scored. And then you've got the yellow cards, red cards. They had one yellow card throughout the whole game. And then Arsenal, they played 4-3-3. They scored 2 goals. They have an XG of 1. And then these are the scorers and the assist. But I think it's just giving the scorers, which is basically one Arsenal player and then the Crystal Palace own goal. They got 2 yellow cards, no red cards. This is the game URL, and then these are all the parts that happened in the game. So these are the events. This is the event time, so 20 minutes, 44 minutes, so on and so forth. No pens. This was the score, so this was the goal, was the first event. And then you have the event players, so you got the assist here, and then you got the scorer, the person who got the yellow card, then a substitution. These are the halves, so that's the first half. These are the second half. You can see where the own goal happened, so it was 85 minutes, and the first goal happened on 20 minutes. And then the score progression as those events happen. So that's why you see so many extra lines. No penalties. So if we go back to our URL, we can see it's got here an XG of 1.2 and 1. 2-0 to Arsenal, which is correct. It was where it says Friday, which you get the 5th of August, as I said. And then you got the scorers here, and then you've got the formations, as we can see here. You can see where the yellow cards and the goals, yellow card, and then these are the events. So you remember when we saw those events, these are all the different events there. And then you've got additional information, which is under the match URL thing, which is the extra one, which is under there, but you can see whether you got the fouls and all the extra bits of information. information. So you can see how easy that was, just literally one line of code. 2 if you include importing the actual library. So that's how you can get that information. Now let's say if you wanted to look at injuries, it does that too. So here's the latest injury list that's happening at the moment. It's quite big. When I was looking at this before, it wasn't as big as when I did a whole video about using the worldfootballr package. So there's been a lot more injuries since the actual football season's kicked off, which is most likely expected with the amount of games that are being played in quick succession and also international duty. So if we go back to our Power BI, and then if we go to this table, then we can see there's those players there. And if we just go over to the other one, we got Zach, Alex, Ivan. So let's go back to our URL. And I've got Zach, Alex, Ivan. There we go. So there's those ones there. That's where it's putting in the information. So all you have to do this is we go into, new source. You go and get the Rscript, get data, and then all you're doing is importing the library, and then you use another form where it asks for, instead of where we had the FB one, this is a different site called Transfer Market, so it starts TM_league_injuries, and then you're just doing country name equals England, because we're just doing the English Premier League, and for the Transfer Market stuff, it always ends up doing it for like the top league of the countries, so you won't get like Championship and so on and so forth. You might be able to, but for this one's just showing you the Premiership, even though it just says England. And that's all you need, just that bit of line of code, because all the hard work's been done in the package to do all the web scraping, and then it just gives you in this nice form. So you can just go through all the different options you have in worldfootballr to be able to pull loads of different bits of data. And also I have a video where I've covered so much about worldfootballr, which I'll link in the description below as well. And this is where I'm now going to show you something which is pretty incredible when it comes to being able to use, even if you're using something that's R related, using it in Power BI can sometimes just make your life a lot easier when you're going back and forth and stuff, because unless you create an R visual that can then be published to the web and be interactive depending on what you're doing, you can just do the same code here, and then like I showed with the visuals, you can just use filters and then be able to get a bit of information. So I'm going to show you a package which is basically one line of code to be able to create a really fancy visual by using all this data here, and this is shot data from last season. And then all I've done is import this by just using the understat, so that's another website which worldfootballr uses, and just called it into shots, and then I've just done the English Premier League for last year. And this table was massive, so it took a good while for it to fully load in. This is another thing, if you're ever going to be working with stuff, sometimes these tables are so big, it's probably better to actually get the data and then import it into Power BI than get the data from Power BI if it's that big. If it's just simple little tables like that, we're just getting one match summary or the injuries, it's not going to take too long for it to refresh, but these do, and they do even in R. So it's literally just because the size of the actual pool of the data. So the great thing here is you've got literally every single shot that every single player's had, and in here you have where the shot took place, all based on how that's going to shoot. And because R has so many people creating different things for it, someone created this particular chart and you think, oh, this looks really complicated because it's a scatter plot of all this kind of thing, but because it's R and people have made these packages, this is all you have to write to get that information using that data set. Isn't that mad? And that's the great thing. All you have to do is just install this, which was made by someone called ggshake_r, to be able to get plot data of shots. And all you do is plot_shot and then the data set. All you do is drop in all these parts here, and then you have this shot here. And because it's XG, it's basically giving you an idea of the chances of them scoring that goal. So something if it's like 1 in 100, it would be 0.1 or is it 0.01 of an XG. But yeah, it's that kind of process of where it's basically what's the chances of scoring that goal, and that's how you get this. And this is just some form of football and analytics. And if you did this in R, you can then filter by the particular player. You don't want to use penalty because penalty is pretty much just standard. I think it's like 0.7 XG, and not everyone scores them, but generally they do, but it messes it up, so you would remove it. So the good thing here is you can get rid of the situation for it and then just get rid, and then you can select the player. So in my example, when I was doing it before, I was showing between England and Harry Kane. You can just go in and then just remove him, and then there we go, just do Kane again. You can select Kane and then it will refresh with Harry Kane's data. And you can do the same with any player. So as you can see, there's literally so many other players in here. You just need to find which one you want and just select it and then just put it in. So let's say if we just put in Anthony, and let's make this actually single selection, because if we make it single selection, I don't have to keep going in and picking out one. Just select Anthony and then it will change and it will give you Anthony's shots. If you try to do this in Power BI, don't know if it's possible, maybe in Deneb, but you still got to pull all that information together. You need to get the data, and that data exists. And that's the great thing. You can pull all this stuff that people have made in the past, recently, spent all their time doing all the hard work. So what we have to do is just put in this single little bit of code, and you suddenly got these great visualizations or this great data set because it's already been created in R, and you can just pull it into Power BI like this, and it's amazing. And that's not all. You can also get information that is about your data set. So there's this other package called Data Explorer that can give you all this information about your data set. All you have to do, again, is just install in RStudio Data Explorer, then come back and you can do plot_intro dataset in brackets for the library Data Explorer using the R visual in Power BI, and then it tells you information about your table. So basically this is just using, again, the Superstore sales dataset, and then it's just looking through all the information you got in here, and it's just telling you bits about the data. You can then do the same about if you have data in your data set, you can drop it all in, and then it can tell you if there's anything that's missing. So if you've got any nulls in your data set or anything like that, you can then do plot missing. In this case, there isn't any, but if there was, it would. And then you have another one, which is basically a bar, and then it gives you, based on the numbers information, that is just a frequency distribution of anything that's worded. So anything that's basically a word, so if you've got like region, category, state here, a subcategory, anything that's got a word, how many times does it count it? And then that gives you the information there. And then you can do the same with a histogram, which is then going to use the numeric parts, so like your sales, your quantity, your cogs, your discount. It's then going to give you a frequency distribution of that as well. So you can see, well, not frequency distribution, the value distribution, sorry. And we can see here that cogs is mainly around the lower point. But one thing with this particular visualization is it can give you a report that you can export. And this is where some of the limitations happen, which can be frustrating when using Power BI, because you can't get all of R to work within it because it's kind of limited to what it is. And there's also other limitations that you need to be aware of with R, especially when it comes to visuals, as there is points where it will not show you duplicates. So if you've got duplicate lines that you want to count the rows of, it only counts it as one. So if you've got 5 rows that are exactly the same, all data across it, and you want to count that and you want it counted as 5 in your visuals, it won't do it in Power BI. It will only count it as 1. Also, it limits to 150,000 lines of, rows of data, and that means if you've got a data set that's bigger than that, it will omit any data beyond those 150,000 rows. So you need to take that into account whenever you're working. If you're working with a big data set, it's probably not best to be using R visuals in this particular case, because that will give you a false reading of information. Unless you're working with a smaller data set, or you were reducing a data set like grouping or something, and then you were doing your R visuals on it, then that's fine. But just ensure that you're keeping on top of those. And also the thing when I said about when you can't click on stuff, it doesn't do anything. That's another thing, so you don't get any cross highlighting, but it does work if you cross highlight on a Power BI visual and click on it, it will. It's just the same as using the filters, so you do get a bit of information. But I've also linked down below the Microsoft limitations webpage where they go through a few other ones, but these are sort of the key ones that you need to watch out for. As I said, this has its limitations because you can't get this PDF report that shows you all the information. And the annoying thing is, if you've had a situation where you're like, oh, I'd really like to look at all the data that's happening in this table, but I can't get the information here. Now in Power Query, you can just pull up your table and then you can get a view of information along here about what your table looks like. So in this case, if we go with this table here, it tells us how many have blanks in it. We can see there's none, values, and you can see a distribution as well. So you do get some information, but not as much as you got there. And there's so much more information you can get. So if you wanted to then use R to be able to give you that final report, you would want to be able to export this data. Now you can export by doing like, say, a copy entire table. There are add-ons that you can get for Power BI that let you export the actual table information, or you can just copy the table. But you can also use Rscript to take your table. So if you were just to reference this table and then like this, so it's just this table like this. So all you need to do is go to source, then transform, and then run Rscript. That's when it will create you an Rscript. And then in here, all you have to do is do write.csv, put in dataset, because you remember everything is always called dataset. It doesn't matter, even though you've gone to here and it's always saving it called dataset. So always remember that. And then we add in where a comma, and then in brackets where you want to save it and what you want to call it at the end. So we're going to call this sales underscore export .csv, and then we want to do row.names equals false, because that will ensure that you don't get these extra numbers across it, because when it exports it will keep the numbers of the rows in there. So you want to do row.name equals false, so you don't get that. And then if you do OK, nothing will happen. If you refresh, nothing will happen. But if you go back to where your table is, and then you've got the export here, anytime you just refresh it, if we just refresh it now, we can then open up the Excel file that we just saved, and we can see here we now have our Excel file, all the information there. And if we were to go back to R, we can load in our actual file here, which is here, using read R, because it's CSV. We're going to use read R, and then we can view it. So if we just run the code, we now have all the data that we've just exported. And if we go back, we can then load up and do the plot intro. So what we're going to do is just install package, which I've already done, so I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to do library data explorer. You can see it's pulled up exactly the same R visual, and the same goes for all these others. But then down here, this is the report I was talking about. So create underscore report. It will create a report. So if we run that for that data set, because where we saved it, we just wait for it to run. Shouldn't take too long because it's not a massive data set for it to be able to work through. And then here we can see this report. So it tells you how many rows are in there, how many columns, discrete columns, continuous columns, many missing columns, missing observations, total observations, and memory allocated. To actually run the visual, it tells you there's the visual, remember we saw here, gives you a breakdown of how it's all split. Remember we got that one we saw before, this one, and then we got some additional ones here. We got correlation based on the different subcategories it's got here, and profit and COGS and everything else. And then you got the principal component analysis, and then you've got a variance analysis, so shows you the variance in it, but it's all very clumped together because there's so many different categories, and that it's pulling it all together, so it's not quite readable. So there'll be instances where you probably want to sort of clean up what you want to export first, and then you can focus on those areas. But yeah, you can see you got this whole data set with just a bit of code to be able to tell you what's going on with your data set. So if you just wanted just a quick overview of a whole table that you've got, and you've just done all the transformations, or you've been given a Power BI data set, you can just export that table data and then just stick it through that few lines of code using Data Explorer, and there you go. And just when you think that's all there was, then you also can do very quick, simple statistics. So again, all I've done is going here, source, so I've just basically referenced that table. And then I've run an Rscript that basically is using a package called psych. And then all I've done is create a data frame that just says describe the data set, and then just include the names because I want to export that information. And then if I go in here, just do retry just to get the data to pull through again. You now have for each column all the different statistical parts to understand what's going on with your data set. Crazy, right? Just one line of code. And then if you wanted to, you can just export it again by simply going to write.csv, the data set, where you want to save it, and there you go. You've now got a statistical analysis of your table with just a few lines of code. So I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please give a like and subscribe. Also, so if you want to learn more about R, check out these videos over here. So until next time.